The room was thick with tension, the kind of silence that foreshadowed a storm. Zohran Mamdani, the progressive firebrand with a passion for social justice, stood face to face with Michael Knowles, the outspoken conservative commentator known for his unyielding stance on traditional values. Neither of them was here to make friends, and it was clear from the moment the debate started that sparks were about to fly. But no one could have predicted how quickly it would escalate into something far more explosive. Zoran's voice rang out with conviction as he challenged Michael's long-held views on the economy, questioning the very fabric of the system Michael had spent years defending. Michael, ever the provocateur, shot back with scathing remarks, dismissing Zoran as an idealistic dreamer who had no real understanding of the world. The back and forth quickly turned personal, with both men throwing accusations and insults that crossed the line of a typical debate. Then, in a moment that took everyone by surprise, Michael made a comment so inflammatory, it sent the entire room into chaos. The comment, though not entirely unexpected from him, was so bold, so reckless, that it struck a chord deep within Zoran. The air crackled with outrage as Zoran stood tall, refusing to back down. The audience held its breath, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Zoran's response was swift and fierce, his words cutting through the air like a sharpened blade. What started as a heated ideological debate had now transformed into a personal battle of wills, and there was no turning back. The scandal that was about to unfold would leave no one untouched. The energy in the room had shifted. What was once a formal debate had become a full-blown confrontation. Zohran Mamdani's words had struck a nerve, and Michael Knowles, who prided himself on being the voice of reason for the right, could no longer maintain his usual composure. His face flushed with anger, he launched into a tirade, accusing Zoran of being a puppet of the far left, claiming that Zoran's so-called progressive ideals were nothing more than a naive attempt to tear down the very fabric of American society. But Zoran wasn't intimidated. Instead, he leaned in, locking eyes with Michael, and spoke in a calm yet firm tone that sent a chill through the room. If standing up for the working class, fighting for equality, and demanding justice for the oppressed means tearing down the system you defend, then call me a revolutionary, Zoran said, his voice unwavering. The audience was on the edge of their seats. This was no longer a debate. It was a battle for the soul of the nation. As the debate raged on, Michael's arguments became more erratic. The once controlled conservative now resorted to personal attacks, targeting Zoran's background, his ethnicity, and even his character. The insults grew sharper, designed to provoke and undermine Zoran's credibility. But every insult, every jab, only seemed to fuel Zoran's resolve. The moment that everyone had been waiting for came when Michael, in a desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative, accused Zoran of being a puppet for foreign interests, suggesting that his progressive stance was somehow linked to global forces that threatened American sovereignty. It was a low blow, but one that Zoran was more than ready to respond to. Without hesitation, Zoran fired back, his voice louder and more commanding than before. You talk about patriotism, but what about the millions of Americans who are suffering because of a system that puts profits before people? You call yourself a defender of freedom, but all you're defending is a broken system that perpetuates inequality. That's not patriotism, Michael, that's tyranny. The room erupted. The audience, divided but electrified, couldn't believe the audacity of Zoran's response. And in that moment, it was clear. Zoran wasn't just fighting for an ideology. He was fighting for the soul of America itself. What had begun as a fiery debate had now spiraled into a scandal that no one could have anticipated. The room was in chaos, with people shouting, some applauding Zoran's passionate defense of justice, while others echoed their support for Michael's more traditional views. But amidst the frenzy, one thing became abundantly clear. The gloves were off, and the stakes had just been raised to an entirely new level. Michael, visibly rattled, tried to regain his composure, but it was evident that his words had failed him. His earlier calculated attacks now seemed desperate, and as Zoran continued to stand his ground, the cracks in Michael's carefully constructed facade were impossible to ignore. Michael's next move was a calculated attempt to paint Zoran as a radical, a threat to the very fabric of American society. someone who would dismantle the country's foundations in favor of a utopian fantasy. But Zohran was not one to back down in the face of baseless accusations. He turned the tables in an instant, forcing Michael to confront the hypocrisy that lay beneath his polished rhetoric. You talk about preserving American values, but what about the American values of fairness, justice, and equality? You defend a system that leaves the poor behind while the rich get richer. You claim to be for the people, but you ignore the cries of those who are suffering the most. Michael, cornered and enraged, tried to deflect, but in his fury, he made a grave mistake. He let slip a personal remark about Zohran's family, a comment so cruel and unprovoked that it crossed a line that would forever change the course of this debate. The comment was not only personal, but deeply offensive, an attack on Zohran's identity and the values he held dear. The room went silent. Everyone had heard it, and there was no going back. Zohran, now visibly shaken but resolute, took a deep breath. He could have reacted in anger, matched Michael's vitriol with more fire, but Zohran chose a different path. He stepped forward, looked Michael in the eye, and said, "You want to attack me on a personal level? Fine. But what you can't do is silence me. You can't erase the truth. And the truth is this: the world is changing, Michael. Whether you like it or not, we're moving toward a future where everyone has a voice and everyone has a chance. You can stand in the way, or you can help build that future. But don't you dare stand there and pretend you're a hero for the people when all you're doing is protecting a system that's broken." The audience, stunned by Zohran's poise and unshakable resolve, could hardly believe what they had just witnessed. Michael, meanwhile, stood there, speechless, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. Zohran had just taken the moral high ground, and in doing so had shifted the entire narrative. This was no longer just a debate, it was a defining moment. The scandal that had unfolded before everyone's eyes was not just about ideology anymore. It was about character, integrity, and the ability to stand firm in the face of personal attacks and a broken system. The dust had settled, but the weight of what had just transpired hung in the air like an electric charge. Zohran Mamdani had gone beyond the call of duty, rising above the petty insults and calculated attacks that Michael Knowles had thrown at him. It wasn't just a battle of ideas anymore. It was a battle for integrity, for what is right. And Zohran had just proven, with every ounce of his being, that he was more than capable of standing up to the toughest opponents. But what was more important, he had shown the world exactly what kind of person he was: unshakable, fearless, and steadfast in his beliefs. The debate had reached its peak, and Michael, now looking defeated, struggled to find his footing. His previous remarks, the sharp jabs he thought would rattle Zohran, had done the opposite. They had emboldened him. Zohran's voice, calm and unwavering, continued to resonate with everyone present. The once chaotic atmosphere was now full of admiration for Zohran's composure in the face of such blatant hostility. But this wasn't just about winning a debate. It was about making a stand. Zohran had become the symbol of something larger than just one individual. He was the voice of a generation, one that would no longer tolerate being sidelined by the establishment. Michael Knowles, with all his attempts to discredit Zohran, had inadvertently made him into a hero. As Zohran stood tall, in the face of a system that worked tirelessly to oppress the people, he became the very embodiment of hope for a better future. "How many times have we heard you speak of protecting the American dream, Michael?" Zohran said, his voice steady and powerful, piercing through the noise that had filled the room. "The American dream isn't about protecting the wealthy. It's about giving everyone, regardless of their background, a shot at success. It's about equality, justice, and opportunity for all. Yet you sit here defending a system that perpetuates inequality, that continues to push the most vulnerable into the shadows. That's not the American dream, Michael. That's the nightmare you've created." Zohran's words were not just aimed at Michael anymore. They were aimed at anyone who had ever used their platform to spread division, fear, and hatred. The debate had grown beyond the personal. It was now a movement, a rallying cry for those who believed in the principles of justice and equity. People across the nation were watching, and they were listening. As Zohran concluded his speech, the room fell silent for a brief moment. so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. The intensity in the air was palpable. Michael, utterly cornered, tried to muster a final retort, but his words faltered. He had nothing left to say. The crowd could see it. Michael had lost not just the debate, but the trust of those watching. His attempt to tarnish Zohran's character had backfired spectacularly. Zohran had won, and it wasn't even close. He had not only defended his beliefs, but had elevated the conversation to new heights, challenging the status quo and calling out the flaws of a broken system. And as the crowd erupted into applause, Zohran's face remained calm, his eyes focused on the future. He had come into this debate as a challenger, but he was leaving as a hero. And this wasn't the end. Zohran's victory was the beginning of something much larger. The scandal that had unfolded, the personal attacks, the heated arguments, the shifting of the narrative, had all served to catapult Zohran into the spotlight. The public had seen who he truly was, a leader for change, someone who would never back down in the face of adversity, someone who would fight for what was right, no matter the pretense. As the debate came to a close, the message was clear. Zohran Mamdani had risen above the noise, and in doing so had become a beacon of hope for the future. He had proven that no matter how hard the fight, standing up for what's right would always be the truest form of victory. If you've been inspired by Zohran Mamdani's incredible stand, don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of this powerful debate? And if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe to stay updated on all the latest. Let's continue the conversation. Your voice matters.